On August 14, 1980, Hollywood froze. Dorothy Stratten, the 20-year-old Playmate of the Year who seemed destined for stardom, was gone. To the world, she was the picture of beauty and success. To those closest to her, she was a young woman trying to escape something she could no longer control. In the weeks before her death, Dorothy had started to sound different. Her calls to friends were hurried. Her laughter felt forced. She told a few people she needed space from her husband, Paul Snider, the man who discovered her and the one she feared most. But no one truly believed her. After all, she was the golden girl of 1980, adored by millions. How could anything be wrong? Her 16-year-old sister, Louise, would only learn later how many chances there were to save her. How many warnings had been missed. For 40 years, she's carried those memories quietly. The phone calls, the headlines, the guilt. Now at 55, she's finally breaking her silence. Because before the tragedy, before the headlines, Dorothy Stratten tried to warn everyone. And no one listened. Long before her name was known across Hollywood, Dorothy Ruth Stratten was just a quiet girl from a working-class neighborhood in Vancouver, British Columbia. Born in February 1960, she grew up in a small rented home with her mother, brother, and younger sister, Louise. Their father had left early in their childhood, leaving their mother to raise 3 children on her own. Life was modest, even harsh at times, but Dorothy carried herself with an unshakable gentleness that people remembered long after she was gone. She was shy, polite, and unassuming. In high school, she was the kind of student who blended in easily, soft-spoken, responsible, and often lost in thought. Teachers would later recall how she seemed to move through life with quiet grace, unaware of the attention her beauty drew. She wasn't chasing fame or glamour. She wanted stability. Maybe college, maybe a family of her own someday. After graduation, she took a job at a Dairy Queen on Killarney Street to help her mother pay bills. That was where Paul Snider first saw her. He was a local promoter, slick and restless, already known around town for his expensive suits and charm that hid an uneasy desperation. To him, Dorothy was more than beautiful, she was opportunity. He started visiting the shop regularly, ordering small cones just to talk to her. Friends would later remember the way he watched her, not with affection, but possession. He told people she could be a model, that he could make her famous. Dorothy, trusting by nature, didn't see the danger in him. She wanted to believe in people, to believe in the good they claimed to see in her. When Snider arranged for professional photos to be taken, she agreed reluctantly, embarrassed by the idea. Those photographs, innocent by intention, would change everything. Within months, they landed in the offices of Playboy in Los Angeles. When the magazine reached out, it felt unreal. Dorothy wasn't seeking the spotlight. She was flattered, hesitant, unsure whether to go. Her mother worried, but Snider pushed hard, convincing her that this was destiny. "This is your ticket out," he told her. And for a girl who'd never left Vancouver, the promise of California sounded like a dream. Louise, just 10 years old at the time, remembered how excited Dorothy was packing her bags. She hugged her sister tightly, promising to write and call as often as she could. There was no sign of fear in her voice, only hope, the belief that she was stepping into a brighter life. No one could have guessed that the man standing beside her at the airport, smiling as he waved, was already planning how to keep her from ever leaving his side. It was the beginning of everything Dorothy thought she wanted, and the beginning of the nightmare that would one day end it all. Los Angeles in 1978 was everything Dorothy Stratten had imagined, and nothing like it at all. The sun, the billboards, the rush of opportunity, it felt unreal. When she first walked into the Playboy offices, photographers couldn't believe she had never modeled before. She was fresh, graceful, and completely unaware of her effect on people. Hugh Hefner saw something special in her right away, innocence wrapped in confidence. To him, she wasn't another centerfold. she was the kind of woman who could carry the brand into a new era. Her first photo shoot was awkward at first, but the camera loved her. What followed was a rise so quick it stunned even the people who worked beside her. By 1980, Dorothy had been named Playmate of the Year. Her smile appeared on posters, calendars, and magazine covers around the world. Invitations poured in, parties at the mansion, dinners with film producers, and modeling offers that promised more fame than she'd ever imagined. But beneath the surface, the shift was already visible. Paul Snider had come to Los Angeles with her, believing he would share in her success. Instead, he found himself standing in the background as she became the star. Friends noticed how uneasy he grew, calling the Playboy mansion constantly, showing up uninvited, demanding to know where she was. Dorothy tried to calm him, insisting she was loyal, but her world was expanding faster than he could handle. Hefner sensed it. He saw the possessiveness, the controlling behavior, and quietly banned Snider from the mansion after an outburst that unsettled everyone. He warned Dorothy to keep her distance, telling others she deserved a safer circle. Still, she felt bound to Paul by guilt and habit. He had discovered her, managed her early career, and convinced her she owed everything to him. The fame Dorothy earned came with isolation. Surrounded by admirers, she missed the simplicity of home. She called her mother often, sent money back to Vancouver, and asked about Louise's school. The glamour never quite felt real to her. Even during public appearances, her voice stayed soft, her posture modest. In interviews, she said she wanted to try acting, maybe one day have a family, but those close to her noticed her attention drifting whenever Snider's name was mentioned. By mid-1980, she began working on small television roles and preparing for a move into film. Casting directors described her as a natural. Yet as her world opened wider, the pressure from Snider grew heavier. He was broke, jealous, and increasingly unstable. Dorothy started staying longer at the mansion, not for luxury, for safety. She told a few friends she needed space, though she never explained why. Her rise was dazzling. Her image was everywhere. But the more famous she became, the smaller her world felt. The man who once promised her everything was now the shadow she couldn't escape. And deep down she knew he wouldn't let her go quietly. By the summer of 1980, Dorothy Stratten was standing at the edge of true stardom. She had caught the attention of Hollywood director Peter Bogdanovich, who cast her in his romantic comedy They All Laughed. The role was small but meaningful, her chance to prove she could act, not just pose. On set, surrounded by seasoned performers, Dorothy impressed everyone with her warmth and patience. She showed up early, stayed late, and never demanded special treatment. Bogdanovich saw beyond the photographs. He saw a young woman capable of far more than the industry had given her credit for. Their connection deepened as filming went on. To him, she was the embodiment of innocence. To her, he represented a world she could trust. Dorothy's friends began to notice a quiet happiness returning to her face. She spent less time answering Snider's endless phone calls and more time focusing on the work that made her feel alive. Bogdanovich encouraged her to take acting classes, to believe that her future could exist without Playboy, and without the man who had shaped her image. Back in Los Angeles, Paul Snider felt the shift immediately. He followed her career obsessively, collecting clippings, replaying her interviews, and calling mutual friends to ask where she was. The success he had once bragged about now felt like betrayal. He told people Dorothy had forgotten who helped her, that she was being manipulated. In truth, she was finally beginning to see how much control he had taken from her. Dorothy moved into an apartment near Westwood and tried to create distance. She began managing her own finances, opened new bank accounts, and traveled to New York for meetings. Snider, now banned from most Playboy events, began spiraling. His charm had faded, replaced by paranoia. He bought recording devices, asked private investigators to follow her, and told others he just wanted to talk things out. Those who saw Dorothy during this time described her as both hopeful and haunted. The film's success felt like a door opening, yet the tension followed her everywhere. She told close friends she was trying to figure things out before returning to Vancouver to visit family. To them, it sounded like she was planning a separation. To Snyder, it sounded like rejection. Hollywood gave her attention, but not protection. She was surrounded by people who adored her beauty, but didn't recognize her fear. On set, cameras captured her laughter. Off set, she was already watching over her shoulder. By the end of filming, Dorothy had made her choice clear. She wanted a new life, a career defined by her own decisions, a relationship built on respect, not control. But Paul Snyder wasn't ready to let go. His obsession had become purpose. And while Dorothy was stepping into the light, he was quietly planning how to pull her back into the dark. By August 1980, Dorothy Stratten's life had reached a breaking point. She had spent months trying to detach from Paul Snyder without provoking him. Friends noticed how cautious she'd become, watching her words, choosing when to call, keeping her location vague. She wanted peace, not confrontation. To protect everyone around her, she downplayed his threats, telling people she only needed to finalize things before moving on completely. She was living apart from Snyder by then, staying with friends and preparing legal steps to divide their finances. Her relationship with Peter Bogdanovich was quietly growing, and she'd begun to believe she could start fresh, maybe in New York, where she could act freely and leave the chaos behind. But even as she planned her next chapter, Snyder kept finding ways to reach her. He called obsessively, sent letters, and told mutual friends that she owed him everything. Each message reminded her how little space he was willing to give. Hefner's circle warned her not to go back. A few of her friends offered to accompany her if she needed to meet him, but Dorothy hated causing alarm. She told them she could handle it, that it would just be a short visit to end things properly. She believed closure could calm him, one last conversation to stop the cycle. On the morning of August 14th, she drove to the small West Los Angeles apartment they once shared. Neighbors saw her arrive, holding paperwork and a small purse. Hours passed with no sign of movement. What happened next would be pieced together only later by police, when they entered the home, to a scene that would devastate her family and the entire Hollywood community. Back in Vancouver, 16-year-old Louise Stratten was at home when the call came. Her mother dropped the phone, screaming. The words didn't make sense at first. The sister who had written her letters, who promised she'd be home soon, was gone. Louise would spend years trying to understand how the warning signs had been missed. In the days after the tragedy, news cameras surrounded the building, reporters shouting questions about a marriage few had understood. Dorothy's friends struggled to speak through tears, repeating the same phrase: she wanted to leave. What no one could say aloud was that she had known this might happen. She had told people she felt unsafe, hinted that she was being followed, begged for space, and still everyone believed it was temporary, that things would calm down once fame settled. But Dorothy had understood better than anyone. Some men don't let go even when love is gone. Her death became more than a crime story. It became a warning, one her sister would carry for the rest of her life. The shock spread across Los Angeles before dawn. News anchors struggled to describe what had happened without saying too much. A rising star was gone, and the man who claimed to love her was responsible. Within hours, police confirmed what everyone feared. Dorothy Stratten's name would never again appear in headlines about fame, only tragedy. At the Playboy mansion, the atmosphere turned somber. Hugh Hefner spoke to reporters, insisting Dorothy had been a victim of jealousy, not of Playboy. Behind the cameras, staff whispered about the warning signs. Many admitted they'd sensed trouble, but no one had wanted to interfere. The glamour that once surrounded her photographs now felt unbearable, every image of her face a reminder of what had been lost. In Hollywood, Peter Bogdanovich was inconsolable. He disappeared from public view, locking himself away in grief. The young woman he believed could be a new kind of star was gone before her first film even premiered. Friends said he couldn't bring himself to watch. They all laughed for years. When he finally did, he called it both beautiful and unbearable, the film that captured her final days alive. Back in Vancouver, the Stratten family faced the unimaginable. The small home where Dorothy had once dreamed of safety now echoed with silence. Louise watched her mother fall apart under the weight of public attention. Cameras outside, letters from strangers, headlines calling her sister the doomed beauty. The words never matched the person they knew. To them, Dorothy wasn't a symbol or a scandal. She was simply family. Louise refused interviews. She didn't want her sister's death turned into spectacle. Every magazine that published Dorothy's photos felt like an intrusion, a theft of what little peace remained. She kept her sister's letters and childhood belongings tucked away, unread for years. For her, grief wasn't something to be performed. It was something to survive. Bogdanovich eventually published a book, The Killing of the Unicorn, where he blamed Hollywood's culture for destroying Dorothy's innocence. The reaction was divided. Some praised him for defending her. Others accused him of exploiting her memory. Louise stayed quiet through it all. She wasn't ready to relive what she'd lost. Over time, Dorothy's image became legend. Documentaries, films, and retellings appeared one after another, each promising to reveal the real story. None could. The truth was simpler and sadder. She had tried to leave. She had tried to warn people, and no one acted until it was too late. For Louise, those words became a permanent echo, a warning she would spend decades carrying. The world had moved on, but for her, time had never restarted. For years after Dorothy's death, Louise Stratten avoided speaking her sister's name in public. She finished school quietly, took acting lessons, and tried to build a life outside the shadow of what had happened. But Dorothy's story followed her everywhere. Reporters sent letters, studios asked for interviews. True crime producers wanted her memories. She refused them all. At 16, she had already seen how easily the world turned tragedy into entertainment. She had no interest in feeding that machine. In the early 1980s, she moved to Los Angeles, searching for purpose in the same city that had taken her sister. She took small film roles, working mostly behind the scenes, trying to stay invisible. Through friends, she reconnected with Peter Bogdanovich, who had never stopped grieving Dorothy. Over time, the two grew close. It was a complicated bond, two people linked by loss, each trying to understand the same ghost. Their eventual marriage drew public scrutiny, but to those who knew them, it was less scandal than survival. They had both been marked by the same event, and neither had ever fully healed. Louise's silence became her protection. For decades, she kept her memories private, choosing privacy over publicity. She attended memorials quietly, stayed away from documentaries, and avoided the press. Those who met her described her as kind but guarded, her eyes distant whenever her sister's name surfaced. She once said in a rare interview that time didn't erase pain, it only taught you to live beside it. Through the 1990s and early 2000s, she built a modest career balancing acting and writing, while maintaining the dignity her sister never had the chance to reclaim. Every few years, a new film or article would appear about Dorothy, each claiming to tell the full truth. Louise would decline to participate, believing no one could capture who her sister really was, the gentle girl from Vancouver who wanted love, not fame. Only recently, as she entered her 50s, did she begin to speak more openly. The tone was never angry, only tired. The voice of someone who had carried silence too long. She talked about how Dorothy tried to warn people, how she sensed what was coming but couldn't find anyone who understood the danger. Louise's words weren't about revenge or blame. They were about understanding, about acknowledging how easily a woman's fear can be dismissed until it's too late. At 55, her decision to break that silence felt less like confession and more like closure. She wasn't revealing secrets for headlines. She was giving her sister something she never had, a voice that could finally be heard. More than 40 years later, the story of Dorothy Stratten still lingers like an unfinished sentence. Her name surfaces in documentaries, magazines, and retrospectives about Hollywood's lost innocence. Each time the same image reappears, the smiling young woman who seemed to have everything, unaware that she was walking through danger disguised as devotion. Yet for her sister, Louise, the story has never been about glamour or tragedy. It has always been about what the world refused to hear. Louise's recent reflections have shifted the narrative from spectacle to lesson. She doesn't dwell on the crime or the headlines. She talks about the systems that failed her sister, the culture that prized beauty over safety, fame over protection. Her words carry weight not because they expose secrets, but because they humanize someone long reduced to photographs. She reminds the world that Dorothy was kind, humble, and quietly afraid. She reminds us that she tried to warn people. In interviews, Louise speaks carefully, pausing between thoughts, as though testing whether the truth can finally exist without pain. She explains how her sister's fear wasn't taken seriously, how power and denial kept people from intervening. Her voice carries no bitterness, only exhaustion, the sound of someone who spent decades wondering if anything could have changed. Hollywood moved on quickly, building new stars and new stories. But the shadow Dorothy left behind remains. Every time another young woman is celebrated for beauty, her name resurfaces as a reminder of what happens when admiration blinds responsibility. Louise hopes that speaking now will stop her sister from being remembered only as a victim. She wants her remembered as a warning, one that still matters. Dorothy Stratten's story isn't just about loss. It's about recognition, about hearing the quiet voices before they fade, about understanding that success can't protect those who are unseen behind it. Louise's decision to speak ensures that her sister's final message will never vanish. She warned everyone. And though no one listened then, her voice still echoes now, asking every generation to do what the last one didn't: believe the warning before it's too late. For more emotional stories, check out this video.